What is up, ladies and gentlemen? You are listening to the Rebel by Design Wrestling Podcast, brought to you by HustleJet ENT, and we are listening to episode number 24. And on this episode, we are to discuss my thoughts on WrestleMania 42 and other WrestleMania memories over the years. I'm going to come up with other little tidbits as well, but the main focus is going to be about WrestleMania 42 and WrestleMania in general. So we are hot off of a weekend of WrestleMania 42. So with it being in the books, I'm going to share you my thoughts and my opinions on how it ranks to compare to the other WrestleManias, and as well as share some of my favorite WrestleMania moments and a couple other little tidbits as well. So getting into it, the overall grade I give the entire show would probably be a C. And I will definitely say Night 2 was way better overall to me compared to Night 1. So, with that being said, I am going to go through each match and give you my thoughts on the match itself and my thoughts and opinions of everything else. So, getting into it, so Night 2 started off with the Usos and LA Knight versus The Vision, Logan Paul's, Austin Theory, and ISO Speed. Wasn't a very long match. It was under 10 minutes. But it was, and the team I expected to win won. It was what it was. The general consent I've seen in the show most of all was a lot of it did feel very rushed, and you'll see what I mean as I go on throughout the shows. And for 7 matches per night, 7 matches on night 1. There were 6 on night 2. We'll get into that. The timing of this pay-per-view was really something that you kind of ask a lot of questions because there were a lot of commercials. And a lot of people have told me or tried to bring up in the past that early WrestleManias were the same way. There were a lot of short matches and stuff and so forth. But keep in mind this. For example, WrestleMania 3, yes, had a lot of short matches. They also had 11 matches and no commercial breaks. So you gotta keep that in mind as well when you try to make that as your argument. So for me, a 7-minute or a match that was about 7 minutes under 10 minutes for your opening match for WrestleMania doesn't sit well with me because I always felt like the first match of the show should have been something that's gonna get the fans into it, get them hot, get them going, get them excited, and you kind of want a banger to open the show. Just because you really want to get that crowd going, and then, but that didn't really happen in the opening contest. I will say match 2 of the night, the non-station match between Jacob Fatu and Drew McIntyre kind of was more on that level. And I felt like that match, it delivered. Now, Jacob Fatu getting the W, I kind of saw that coming. Even though I am a big Drew McIntyre fan, and I think that Drew has kind of been getting a lot of the short end of the stick on a lot of these major PLE matches, that he don't get a lot of the wins as he should. Because Drew is a star. He should be kind of a guy who should be much higher up the card than he get utilized as throughout the. He's kind of been up and down a lot to me, but it was what it was. Jacob Fatu winning makes a lot of sense, especially knowing that Drew is going to be off filming a reboot of the Highlander, so he's obviously be taking some time up. So it kind of helps Jacob Fatu, who is again another major star, upcoming star. So it works either way. Next was another match that should get more time because it was for who all was involved. we have a fatal four-way tag team match for the women's tag team titles. Um, Again, not a long match by any stretch, but it definitely served the main purpose of what we got that a lot of people didn't expect to see coming until the weekend hit. That was Nikki Bella being replaced by the return of Paige. Which, I feel fortunate that I met Paige earlier this month, or the end of last month. So a few weeks out of meeting her, that here she is returning to WWE, which is going to make it harder to ever have to be able to meet her going forward as a full-time WWE talent, which has been reported that she signed a new multi-year talent with WWE. So her and Brie Bella became the women's tag team champions. It should be interesting to see where this goes from here, especially when Nikki Bella does become healthy again to wrestle. What happens with that? That should be an interesting concept, and I'm kind of be interested in how they play that out. But the match was okay for what time was given. It's kind of one of those it's going to be a known pattern they're going to see throughout WrestleMania this year. Then we had the Intercontinental Women's Title match, Becky Lynch versus AJ Lee. Again, another match that was not given. Was under 10 minutes long. Now I didn't time this to give you the exact number, but I just know that. Looking at a clock, that wasn't 10 minutes. But I get so. Becky Lynch winning the title, not a huge surprise to me. AJ Lee has been a lot, for the most part, a part-timer. And they really haven't done it. So they really wasn't allowed to do a whole lot with AJ Lee to give her a long title run because she just wasn't around. The match itself was okay at best. I don't think it was great. There were times in the match that was kind of clunky, so I can't say it was an amazing match. So, the match 5 is one of the second longest match of the night that I could tell. It was Gunther versus Seth Rollins. Gunther wins by submission, and we also saw the return of Braun Breaker. Fantastic entrance, by the way, for Seth Rollins, by the way. This match was what it was. I didn't really have a prediction of who's going to win this match going into it, so. But the return of Braun Breaker, obviously, that means Seth and Braun are going to be going at it going forward. That should be very interesting. Gunther continues to pile up big wins over top level talent. What does that mean for him going forward? Should be interesting because the main event picture is really interesting in a lot of different ways. Then the sixth match for night one that I did not like how short this match was. That was between Liv Morgan and Stephanie Bakir, with Liv Morgan becoming the women's champion again. For a match that has so much build towards it, I didn't feel like it made sense for it to be so quick. Because this match was definitely, one of the shortest matches of the night. If not for night one. And I don't feel like it was worthy of having a short match like that. And because they put so much time and effort into building up this match, is why I feel that way. Because this is one of those matches that they put a lot of time into building it up. You know, so many interview segments, so many back and forth promos and all that stuff that they did. I felt that it should be one of the longer matches of the night. But it wound up being one of the shortest. So, not that I have a big problem with Liv Morgan, who is probably the hottest heel that they have in the entire women's division, winning the title. I didn't have a problem with that. Liv is more of a complete package wrestler for WWE. You know, she's great on the mic. She's solid in the ring. Obviously, she's got the look, and she knows how to generate a lot of heat. Janine Vancouver is a phenomenal wrestler, but in the WWE world, even though that's where she wanted to be, her English promo skills, it's hard for her to be held up in the WWE universe as far as what WWE looks for in a talent. That's just my honest opinion. I like Stephanie a lot. She's an amazing wrestler, like I said. But there's one thing that she kind of lacks in that, makes it more difficult to book her as a strong long-term champion. He's got no itch. Now we finish with the main event of night one, which was Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton for the WWE Undisputed Championship. This match, I hated it. It should have been a lot better than what it was. There was a lot of things that didn't need to happen in that match. I was not a fan of the whole getting the involvement of Jelly Roll and Pat McAfee. That whole storyline and that whole angle was stupid to me. It wasn't needed. It didn't need Pat McAfee or Jelly Roll to sell that match. I get they want the whole celebrity involvement, but they leaned on it way too much than they have done in previous years. There was never been a time where you had so many celebrities involved physically at WrestleMania compared to what we saw this year. And the whole storyline that Randy Orton and Pat McAfee were trying to push made zero sense for the WWE. Now, if it was a shot to the other companies, fine. But they tried to present that this was a WWE issue that they're trying to push with that, and it did not make sense for what they're pushing. Because there was nobody in WWE that fits the description of what the agenda was, which was smaller guys doing a lot of moves. It basically was referring to a lot of the AEW talent. Smaller guys that are 5'5", and not built like a tank. That's basically what Pat McAfee was saying, but there's nobody in WWE that's getting that push that fits that description. That's why it was like, who was this meant for? It felt like it was more of a jab to AEW, but it was completely irrelevant to what was going on in the situation in the WWE. And Cody Rhodes himself does not fit the description either. So, to the WWE fan, where does this make sense? As far as to the WWE fan of what the agenda is they're trying to push. It just doesn't make sense. So, that concludes night one, and that's probably why the overall show is getting a C, because night one was very much the weaker show. But it looks like we're done with the Randy Orton Pat McAfee thing. Because due to stipulation, I'm sorry, I'm dealing with allergies. No matter what I take, this is not working the way I want to work. So here we kind of sniffing with a sniffle a little bit. I apologize. The night two, which I felt was the better of the two nights, um, started off with again a it was a short match, but it also made sense for what it was. When Oba Femi and Brock Lesnar was announced, this was the match I was looking forward to. One of the matches I was looking forward to the most, and I was also very curious what booking direction we're going to go with as far as what kind of match we're going to see. Because it could have gone either way. It could have been kind of long and back and forth trading and power moves, or they could have went with the squash factor. With this match, they ended up going to more direction of it was short. Oba, just kept getting up from Brock's big moves. And Oba ended up getting the win, and I love this because Oba Femi to me is going to be your next kind of final boss of the future. I don't want to use the cliche they use for Brock Lesnar as the next big thing, but to me, that's what he actually is. For the long-term future of the company, or the guys you're going to see in the main event picture for the long term, it should be Oba Femi. And for Brock, who looks like he's getting ready to retire, they look like he'd retire. Like he put his gloves and boots in the middle of the ring, like retirement symbols usually are. If this is how Brock goes out, Brock did the best scenario possible by putting over Oba Femi in a major way. And I was having a discussion with a friend of mine, because we're talking about Oba Femi a lot, that he's shown that he can cut a great promo. We know what he can do in the ring. That he reminds me a lot in a scenario way. If I was going to compare to a wrestler from the past, Oba Femi reminds me a lot of a younger version anyway, because Batista kind of did start older. But he reminds me of Batista. But when I say that, I talk about a man who can, if need be, have a long match if he needed to. But he's a power-based wrestler. And he's got enough personality and charisma to carry himself in any angle, storyline, and on the mic. Oba Femi has shown that he can work the mic, he can work the crowd, and he can work with the bell rings. And the style that he wrestled reminds me a lot of how Batista wrestled. And we know that if he needs to be called on to have a longer match, then, that he can do it. So, that's why I say Batista and Oba Femi, the reminder, how they remind me of how Oba, he reminds me of Batista. That's what I mean, because, again, we know that Batista, was strong on the mic, or was, above average on mic. And we know Batista, when called upon, could work a longer match. We saw it with Triple H. We saw it with Undertaker, just to name a couple. So Oba gets the big W, gets the monster victory at on the big stage at WrestleMania. That's going to be huge for Oba, and I'm going to be very interested in how they book Oba going forward to keep that momentum strong, because I'm thinking that he's going to be a champion by the end of the year. And if he's not, and he's not about ready to be pushed as getting a big WrestleMania moment next year, then they did something completely wrong, in my opinion. So the second match of the night was the six-pack ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship, featuring Rey Mysterio, JD McDonagh, Dragon Lee, Rusev, Devon Evans, and current champion Penta. Penta retains the championship in a very it was what we expected out of a ladder match. A lot of crazy high flying spots. That's what it was. Um, Penta getting the WrestleMania win. Because he hadn't really been champion that long, so I'm not mad at that. Um, because if anybody was going to win the title besides Penta retaining, I would have gone with Javon Evans anyway. Uh, then we had Trick Williams versus with Little Yachty versus Sami Zayn for the U.S. Championship. Trick Williams gets the big W, becomes U.S. champion. Not a very long match again. But Trick Williams, again, another one of the guys named in that group of guys who's going to be headlining a lot of people in the future. Um, uh, I would not be surprised if, in all honesty, if we're not seeing a lot of Oba Femi versus Trick Williams in the same boat as we've seen like Rock and Austin or uh Cena Orton and those pairings of your 1A 1B quarterbacks for your long term future. Those two I think are going to be it. Um, Trick Williams had a great look. Uh, and his character is off the charts. I really like what he does. So I have no problem him being U.S. champion. I really don't. Um, being when he was Sami Zayn, I could say that could be a longer match, but it was what it was. Then we had Dominic Mysterio versus Finn Balor in a street fight. The Demon, Finn Balor, had with the Demon, Finn Balor getting the win. This went a way that I kind of hoped for. And I know how high people are on Dominic Mysterio. I really like him. He's an amazing heel. But Finn Balor, especially as the Demon, needed this win. As the Demon Finn Balor. And I say that because when you think about the Demon Finn Balor, when they first brought him into the character, he was supposed to be like one of these unstoppable things. And it's one of those things to me that because he lost the Edge, before that he lost to Roman Reigns, the Demon Finn Balor lost the mystique a lot of the mystique of what it means to fight the demon version of Finn Balor. That alter ego of his that's more dangerous, more unstoppable. Affected the last 2 times people fought him, he was stopped. So the Demon Finn Balor character needed this win in order to regain and keep on giving the mystique of what the Demon Finn Balor meant when they bring him out. They break that ice and bring him out. Which is something we don't get very often. So it makes more sense that he got the win. So the next time they do bring him out, whenever that is, it's going to mean more again. So that's why I like that Finn Balor won this particular match. Next, we had the women's the WWE Women's Championship match between Jade Cargill defending against Rhea Ripley. Rhea Ripley won. Not really a surprise to me because they weren't doing anything with Jade Cargill to begin with. For the longest time, they kind of forgot that she even existed, let alone as champion. But I will say the best thing about this match was this was by far Jade Cargill's best match since she got to WWE, if not maybe her best match, period. Not including the AEW stuff. Because a lot of her AEW stuff was that she was treated as a, as a dominant force. Um, the only match you can really compare it to from the AEW standpoint was probably the match she had with Sky Blue or with Chris Statlander. But again, to me, I think personally, this was definitely her best WWE match and arguably her best career match, period. Now, the main event of night two, WWE World, the World Heavyweight title match between Roman Reigns versus CM Punk for the title. Roman Reigns becomes the champion. This was a great match. A great match, and it totally made up for night two, like the match on the night two, night one main event lacked. This was an excellent match. Roman Reigns wins without any interference whatsoever. No bloodline, no nothing. A straight up match. And I really enjoy seeing that for a change. Because like any other match that you see Roman Reigns involved in lately, it was something bloodline related. But this time, these two just went at it head to head. And it was a great match. Roman Reigns picked up the W. Now he is now the World Heavyweight Champion. And I'm going to be curious to see how often do we get Roman Reigns going forward as long as he has that title. Because one of the biggest things I hated about Roman Reigns as the undisputed champion the last couple of years he had that belt was the fact that we hardly ever saw him. And I'm hoping this is not one of those situations where the next time we see Roman Reigns is SummerSlam. That's kind of my biggest fear right now that we're not going to get much of Roman until SummerSlam, because that's kind of been the pattern in the past. I'm hoping I'm very wrong about that. But it was really, really nice to see that match in WrestleMania Night 2 that wasn't full of interferences, run-ins, and all that stuff. That we just finally got a straight-up match with no BS. And that was, really for me, was very refreshing to see. So that kind of, concludes my overall thoughts about WrestleMania 42. Next year is going to be Saudi Arabia, so that's going to be very interesting. So yeah, those are my thoughts and opinions on WrestleMania 42. Now, I have been alive for every single WrestleMania that existed. But WrestleMania 6 was the first one I saw. To change the subject a little bit, but kind of talk about some of my favorite WrestleMania moments now. The first WrestleMania I do remember watching from start to finish was WrestleMania 6. Which was headlined by Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior, right? I always reflect to that show as the event that really, caught me into, sent me into being a wrestling fan. Keep in mind, I was young. I was not even 10 years old yet. So I was way too young to actually remember when one happened because I was only a 3-year-old at the time, So I gone back though to watch all those other WrestleManias. So I still, even going back to watch them, I still understand the importance and how major WrestleMania 3 was, especially with Hogan, Andre, and how incredible a match that Savage and Steamboat had. as well. But I understood the moment of what made Hogan and Andre so special, even though from a technical standpoint, the match itself wasn't a wrestling clinic by any means. But there was a magic in the air that you only see always so often to get captured, right? WrestleMania 6 was the same way. Hogan and Ultimate Warrior, again, was not a technical masterpiece of a match. But it's still the energy and the emotion of the crowd and everything else that's involved in it is what made it so special. No matter how basic the in-ring work was, it served the purpose of what it needed to do to make that match phenomenal. And we jump, and we're the same kind of match year down the low from Hogan in WrestleMania 18 with The Rock. Again, the crowd of that show from that event was made that match special, and the in-ring work didn't need to be anything flashy to serve the purpose, and it did. And that's why I always said that it was one of the greatest WrestleMania matches of all time. And when I did the podcast episode a little while back, you can reflect to it, when I talk about the 5-star match rating that Dave Meltzer does, and the people who are on that list who never had one, if that was a true statement or not. Now, The Rock and Hogan were not on Dave Meltzer's list of ever having one. But I put that match on there as one of those matches that was, to me, a 5-star match. And the main reason why I said it was because of the crowd. And how invested they were into it. And how drawn into that match people were into it. You know, that's what made that match special, because every single contact and look to stare down, and any physical contact they made to one another, the crowd reacted to it. That's what made it brilliant and made it awesome. So that's why I put it on the list of 5-star matches, because the crowd being that invested into it is what makes a match great. Roman and Punk, what we just saw, it was one of the best in-ring performance matches and story-told matches. Probably one of the better ones we've seen in quite some time. To be fair, there wasn't lazy booked as far as needing a bunch of interferences in. Some of the best matches in history are better off that way. They just need two guys who are straight up just trying to show who the better man is up front without a bunch of hoo-ha on the side. It works when it works when you need it, but there's times where it don't need it. It really don't. Like, I think back to WrestleMania 16, or a lot of people call it WrestleMania 2000. That Fatal 4-Way was so overbooked, and nobody remembers that match, hardly. When you think about that particular WrestleMania, you think of the triple threat ladder match between the Hardys, the Dudleys, and Edge and Christian. The main event of that show was kind of one of those. It was too much. It didn't need to be a Fatal 4-Way. It didn't need all the McMahons doing their BS. It took away from what it meant. It should have, still to my opinion, no knock to Big Show or Mick Foley, but it should have been The Rock versus Triple H. To be brutally honest about that match. Foley would already, lost the Hell in a Cell and supposedly been retired. The Big Show, I get it why he was in it, but still, he wasn't needed for that particular match. My opinion. I think The Rock versus Triple H 101 would have been a better way to go as far as a headliner for WrestleMania. Just my opinion. Because when you look at the rest of the card, the star-studded part of it was lacking because everybody was in the main event, and plus Austin and Undertaker were both out of action. So the star power was very top heavy on that show, and it didn't have that Benoit, Angle, and Jericho did a triple threat match as well. So it takes away 3 more of your top performers. And Angle was still green, was still on the rise, but you get what I mean. But when I think about that, again, that's a match that didn't need all the BS. Now, when Cody beat Roman and it had Cena, Taker, the Bloodline, all that running, that kind of worked in a way because all these legends and stuff that helped Cody was all counteracting what the Bloodline had been doing for so long. Finally, somebody was smart enough to make a phone call, or whatever you would call it, to have somebody come and counteract whatever they're doing. That way, it's not just the same old criminals that are always outnumbered and nobody's there to help, but Cody found the help, to counteract what was going on. So that was a situation where it made some sense. Especially knowing what the long term will be going on with the Bloodline for so long. That somebody would come up and help them, help respond to what was going on. Some of my other favorite matches, obviously, for WrestleMania purposes. I mentioned Hogan Rock. Obviously, Austin, Rock, all 3 of them were great. I loved all of them for different reasons. Me and a friend of mine would kind of always go back and forth whether 17 or 15 was the better match. And it's hard to say which one is better because it kind of depends on what kind of match style are you looking for. Because they're both kind of different. I like all 3 of them, to be honest. I prefer 17, even despite the ending of that match. But I don't hate the other ones. I love the TLC at WrestleMania was awesome. Bonuses with Rhino, Lita, and Spike Dudley in there. Obviously for WrestleMania 2000, I love the first ladder match between the 3 teams. Both Undertaker and Shawn Michaels matches were awesome. I still love watching Kane and Undertaker at WrestleMania 15. To me, that was kind of almost one of the highlight matches of that particular show. Excuse me, 14. What am I thinking? Brain fart. 14. I know Austin and Shawn could have had a better match, but we know what the condition of Shawn Michaels was, and that it was a miracle that he even got through that match. Because you watched King of the Ring 96, a couple years prior to that, which ended in a no contest. And excuse me, King of the Ring 97, the year before that. King of the Ring 97. Man, my years, I don't know why I jumped my years up so bad just now, but it's okay. King of the Ring 97, Shawn Michaels and Austin had a match. And up until the ending of that match, they were having a fantastic match. Now, granted, this was before Austin's neck injury, and Shawn Michaels didn't have a busted up back. This match kind of showed how good of a match they could have really had. Of course, it didn't end it with a clean cut finish because of Heart Foundation stuff related, right? But I can only imagine how good of a match this would have been had Shawn Michaels been healthy and Shawn Michaels that we know more now, or what we saw during the second run, if that mindset was existed in 1998, how good of a match it would have been. And how, but it did serve the purpose of launching the Austin era, and we know how well that went. um, for WrestleMania 19, there was two ones that stood out. I love Jericho, Shawn Michaels. I love Brock and Angle. Hogan the Man was a great evening classic, but it was entertaining no less. That's what I'll say about that match. Like, keep in mind, I'm not a big Hogan guy. I don't like Hogan that much. So, yeah, keep that in mind. That I can appreciate what he done, some of the moments he has, but that don't mean I have to like the guy or say I'm a fan of his because I wasn't. Because back when I was a kid, and I was really getting into the wrestling, Hogan was kind of almost halfway out. Because you got to think Hulkamania was kind of running this course for the first time because he left in '93. I goes it was around the time I was getting into it. But I always favored more the heels for a while. I was a big Piper fan, and a lot of stuff why I liked by Piper was the stuff the back when you go to the movie stores and get the VHSs. I read one of the best of Piper videos, and it was all of this stuff from like Piper's Pit and him as a heel. And I thought it was the greatest thing ever. And Piper was the first guy that I really was drawn to was as controversial as now these days. The Bad News Brown Piper fight at WrestleMania 6. It's controversial because of the body paint and all that, and I understand that part. But the part that drew me into it more than anything else was the fact that they're just beating the heck out of each other. That's all I cared about as a kid. Piper and Bad News Brown is beating the holy heck out of each other. And I was drawn to that physical part of it. Now, obviously, older me and understanding everything going on in that match, it's kind of looked at it in a different way. But me as a kid, it was just the fight. These two guys were just doing nothing but punching, kicking, and hitting the hell out, and beating that crap out of each other. And I thought, a young kid me, thought that was the coolest thing ever. A lot of the more recent women's title matches, like this year was a letdown compared to previous years. I felt like because when you think about some of the big women's matches we had in recent years, like last year, for example, the triple threat match between Bianca Belair, Rhea Ripley, and Io Sky. That match was phenomenal. Tiffany Stratton and Charlotte Flair, that match was really good too. Both of those matches were way, better than any of the singles title women's title matches we had this past year. And keep in mind, they were given more time too to really tell that story. Um, and like at WrestleMania 40, you know, we were talking about the main event, right? But again, you know, Rhea Ripley versus Becky Lynch and Bayley versus um, and Io Sky. Again, both of them had great matches on that show. But again, they were also given the time. So like that's one of my biggest gripes about this past year was timing of some of these big matches, right? The women's matches again, none of them were 10 minutes or more than 10 minutes. All the women's matches I just named were close to 15 minutes, if not longer. So time makes a big difference, and you kind of are disappointed when you realize how much time and effort they built those matches up. Let's name a bunch of women's matches that I truly enjoyed over the years. A handful of them anyway. And of course, there's plenty more than just that. Keep in mind, I'm also a big Ruthless Aggression era fan. That 2022, 2020, that 2002 to 2006 era. Those women's division was one of my favorites. So obviously, Trish versus Jazz versus Victoria versus WrestleMania 19 stands out to me. Um, of course, I am a big fan of Trish and Victoria are two of my favorite, couple favorites of mine. Um, but then we had at 18, we had um, another triple threat women's match. This time, it was Trish and Lita and Jazz. Um, so again, that wasn't a long match though, but it was one of the few Lita matches that we got at WrestleMania, which is crazy to think about. To be honest, we reflect back on that, but like her roles were always something different, and because some of it and a lot of it had to do with injuries. Um, she missed 19 because of the neck injury. Um, she just wasn't on 20 at all. Um, and then her other roles was like she was either coming from the knee injury or she was doing the stuff with Edge, which we saw in 05 she was doing a knee injury. 06 she was doing involved with the match with Edge and McFoley. So playing different roles, if you will, and of course injuries kind of play a factor as well. So it's kind of crazy to think that it wasn't until a few years ago, where she had her other WrestleMania match, where she walked in as one half of the Women's World Tag Team Champions. Um, which was a really cool moment to see her, Trish, and Becky as a team, against Damage Control. That was a fun little moment. That was a fun moment, but the aftermath kind of not so much. Because I still wish Lita didn't have a chance to come back to kind of seek out revenge for being taken out. Never got the redemption of that. But that's just how the cookie crumbles, that they say at times. Um, I am a big Macho Man fan. He's now one of the favorites. I liked him against the Warrior. And obviously him and Steamboat, two couple favorite matches of mine. Um, even though he didn't get the W on either one of them, unfortunately, but it doesn't take away the fact how good Macho Man was as a performer, especially against to get a great match out of the Ultimate Warrior. Very few people could say they've done that. You know, and I know that that's kind of talking about being that to the Ultimate Warrior. In a lot of ways, it is. Um, but it is my opinion, so I can say what I want about that. This is my show. Um, so there's a lot. Couple more matches I can name. Two are from WrestleMania 10. I love the Bret Owen match, and I love the ladder match between Shawn Michaels and Razor Ramon. Um, there's just so many. And it's crazy to think there's been 42 WrestleManias. And when you think about it, more crazy like how the night two, um, being added, being two nights, like you just have that much more to think about as well. Um, but night one, but I still think that while the two night WrestleMania makes a lot of sense, I really don't think WWE books them in a way to utilize the two nights to their best. That's my personal opinion on it. Because it seems like a lot, especially the last couple of years, night one seems to be always weaker than night two. And I would prefer if they were booked to be a little more even, and that way, and if that starts gravitating that reputation, then you be have not have to worry about having lesser attendance on one night compared to the other. By a couple thousand or whatever that number actually is or was. Like you would think that, like if you book your shows evenly, that both nights would do amazing work, but like the pattern has been for the last couple of years, that night one has been kind of weak. But like when you look at last year, like the last match, like the only match that was good for night one was the main event, the triple threat match between Roman Punk and Seth. That was the only match that really stood out on night one last year that I recall. But like, everything until the main event on night two was great, except for the how Cena and Orton, I don't know, excuse me, Cena and Cody went did not go very well at all because it was a huge disappointment for what we were expecting, which is, you know, a lot of people say, well, you should expect so much, but like, well, if you don't tease so much and then not deliver, and the way they try to make heel Cena wrestle and not be as be so basic, which like obviously going to draw heat, but at the same time be very boring. And then like the only interference you're going to get is Travis Scott, who that for an angle that went nowhere, and there was no Rock, even though he was involved in his heel turn and all of a sudden he just disappeared and claimed that, well, my job was done. Like, the hell it was. It made no sense. And it took away from everything on that. But, that's how it was last year. So, because, thank God they had that rematch at SummerSlam, and it made that match pretty much forgotten at some point. Because obviously the rematch at SummerSlam was far better. And it was the kind of match you wanted to see, and you were hoping to get at WrestleMania. But again, turning Cena back to being a babyface helped that a great deal. But yeah, I could. So a couple other old things, tidbits are coming up. Um, since the last podcast I did, I went to another Comic Con. I went to a Comic Con and met back up with Lita again, as well as Devon Dudley. Kevin Nash was supposed to be there, but having to cancel. So yeah, I did do a Lita. Was twice in a 2 week time span, which was great to see her both times. Devon wasn't at Square Circle Expo, but he was at this event. It was the second time I met him, and he's always been a really nice guy. He did the panel by himself, and he was very entertaining with that, telling different stories and things of that nature. And because it was supposed to be Lita Nash part of that as well, but Lita got stuck in traffic because traffic was hell getting around Springfield and into that parking lot. That's not gonna say about the event itself because that part of it, because the event itself overall was good. A lot of cool things to see. Cool celebrity guests besides just the wrestlers. Get a little off topic on wrestling topic, but I'll swing back around. I got to see meet Vicki Lawrence, who played Mama's Family, a show that I watched every single episode at least once in my life. Randy Quaid was there, aka Cousin Eddie from the Vacation movies. Among other different roles he'd done, including Kingpin. I remember from Days of Thunder, being the team owner, among other things. That was neat. Anthony Michael Hall again played the first Rust on National Lampoon Vacation, and was a slew of different. If you had a kid in the '80s movie, likely he was there, or a teenager. Likely you'll see him there somewhere. That's he's been in so many different movies in that genre, in that era. So yeah, that's something else I was done since the last episode. But I am trying to keep throw out more episodes because I have ideas and plans I want to do in the upcoming year into next year. But one of my main goals for now is to get consistent on bringing out episodes. This is the second one for this month, I believe. So I've been trying to get back to my bi-weekly schedule as far as episodes go. So hopefully number 25 comes out in early May is the plan, I hope. Then I'm trying to get back in getting some guests involved, possibly co-hosts. There's a lot of ideas in my head of what I want to do and try to make this even better and more entertaining. By having different things going on. I want to try to even get special guest hosts for a couple episodes because I want to do I have some kind of panel ideas that I want to do, but I want to get more than one voice to talk about certain topics I have been putting on hold, which the general wrestling topics though don't really have any kind of age to it. It's just a matter of getting people my wrestling friends to coordinate time on that. But at some point, hopefully, we'll be doing that. They have certain numbers of episodes I want to get to. Then I want to try to pull in maybe some bigger names uh, in the wrestling industry. Um, but I still really want to do independent talent more than anything else because they have a lot more to promote at times and they're more easy accessible at times as well. But their stories are way interesting too because the only problem I have with bigger names at times, not to say I won't have them because I will, I do want them. Um, the challenge for me for the bigger names go that I'm really working hard on is coming up with questions that they don't get asked a lot. Because I want to have, I want to be that guy that asks the same questions that they get asked every other interview they do. That's kind of what I'm trying to avoid. So when I think about some of the leads I have of the bigger names that I could try to get on here, um, I'm like trying to be careful with that because I want to make a nice list of questions that are not only respectable but they are interesting and again unique. And that's kind of like where my challenge for myself is to be like, okay, how often have they been asked about this topic or that topic? You know what I mean? Like that's kind of where I'm at on that because example A, I've interviewed Lita for the Cup question with Lita in 2022, right just after COVID. If I ever got her on this podcast, which I'm not saying I'm going to, I want to ask her questions that she don't get asked a lot, or while people will always want to talk about her match with Trish at the main event Raw, I know she probably answered every single question possible about that particular match. And I love that match. Don't get me wrong. I love that match. But I don't know if there's anything I could ask about that match that has not been asked before or been answered at least a half million, at least 100 times in previous interviews by both sides. If that makes sense. Now, keep in mind, I'm only using that as an example. Because I'm not saying she's going to be on this podcast ever. I'm not saying that she won't. Because she is aware of it. I can tell you that. Because I did talk to her about it a little bit. But if I ever reach out to her to be on this podcast, it's going to be at least going to be about 50 episodes into it before I start reaching out to her for that. Because there's a certain number of episodes I want to get to. And to get more comfortable, to get more guests, to be more, better at the interview side of things. Because I know I could do it. I've done it. And I've really enjoyed the people I've spoken to. And I do want to try to do better reaching out for more guests. So that should cut down a lot because there's a lot of ways I could get guests. Costing money, obviously, for the bigger names. Because I know there's a way to get Victoria on here. But I know that costs money to do that. So that's kind of one of those also getting the funds together to bring those names in is also the other part of the aspect. Because Victoria is another one I want to have on here, another favorite of mine. But again, I don't want to ask her questions that she asks constantly, or and that's kind of where I want to be different in that matter. Now I'm not sure what those questions are yet. I'm not gonna say them now because if I had any, because I don't want them to be stolen. Obviously, just kidding around. But that's kind of where I'm at on that when it comes to like the bigger name guests, because I want to be something unique, as well as try to be not only entertaining as well, but as well as educational. But the main thing is I want it to be a fun interview where like we're laughing, we're talking about things that we're not they don't get to talk about a lot, and they probably want to. And then that's one of those things where that I want to be able to try to do because I want to stand out. Obviously, standing out is a big deal, but I wanted this to be something different. At the end of the day, so like that's just where my research comes in, and my me listening to other interviews comes in, because I want to be like, okay, you never really talk about this topic that much, but but you talk about this topic all the time. I want to, straight away from the topics that always get talked about, depending on who you are as a talent. Now if you're a talent that are not as well known, it's all good. Like as far as questions go. But I try not to ask the same basic questions that everybody else does, if that makes sense. I try to avoid that. I can't really say I do that all the time perfectly. I've only done like a handful of interviews so far, but that's the other main goal I want to do by between now and the end of the year into next year. Obviously, I'm hitting up 25 will be the next episode. So when I'm thinking of number 50, I'm only halfway there. So in that nature, but also it gives me a goal to keep going and keep pushing. At the same time. But who will be the first like major name to get on here? I don't know. Will it be sooner than 50? Maybe. I'm not guaranteeing nothing, and I'm not going to guarantee anybody. I just know how to contact certain people, but that don't mean anything. It don't. But I can only use them as examples for now, and hope maybe not. But for now, I want to thank everybody whoever watched or listened, depending on where you get this podcast from. And we do have audio and video. Again, I always thank everybody who watches and supports this podcast. This has been the episode number 24 of the Rebels by Design Wrestling podcast. And I'll catch you until at number 25.